And I caught up with ANZ's Chief Executive Mike Smith after the presentations. Mike Smith, welcome back to Lateline Business.
Hi.
Now, no surprise over interest rates, I guess, but you talked about CPI, the food costs. We've also got this skills shortage that's building. What are your outlook for inflation and interest rates?
I think inflation is definitely going to be an issue as we move forward. Not only the commodity prices which are flying through in terms of food prices in particular, but as you say, wage inflation is going to be an issue as we move forward. That is going to create pressure for the Reserve Bank to lift interest rates at some stage. I think hopefully we'll see that the strength of the Aussie dollar will take some of the heat out of the need to adjust interest rates, because I think as we stand right now, raising interest rates would actually have quite an adverse effect on most of the economy, taking away the natural resource sector, which of course is doing very well.
The banks had good improvement in net interest margins, partly due to funding costs falling. Where do you see NIM moving to next?
It's definitely going to be coming off now. I mean, I think that we've reached that plateau where it will continue. We're already seeing the competitive effects, particularly in the institutional bank. Margin compression is real there as banks are competing for deals. That is creating a downward pressure on margin.
Speaking of competition, we've got the Senate Banking Inquiry report coming out on Friday, and it looks as though they, rather than going for the big four, they're looking at ways to try and bring up the smaller players, particularly accelerating tax breaks for foreign banks and perhaps revitalising the mortgage-backed securities market. What do you think of those two initiatives?
Well, I must admit I haven't seen any detail of that, but I think I've said to you before. I've lived in 10 countries, worked in 10 countries in my career. I find actually Australia is one of the most fiercely competitive environments for banking. So, whereas the inquiry was into competition, I think we've got it in spades.
Yes, well, except that the profits continue to go up of the big four banks, and your dividends are now spilling forth to the great pleasure of your shareholders.
Which includes most people in the country in one way or another in terms of their superannuation. But I think if you look at the return on equity of the business, we're about 16%. A lot of shareholders would say that is not enough yet.
You talked today about a new normal when it comes to lending growth, slower than pre-crisis levels, and in fact not actually returning to pre-crisis levels. This is across big and small business.
Oh, I think it's also across consumers as well. I think it's if we look back at the era before the crisis, we had 20 years almost of a bull market run where lending growth was significantly higher than GDP growth. And that's all finished. Those days are over. Banking is a case in point where, you heard the analysts asking today about, well, what's credit growth? When's credit growth going to be the same as it was pre-crisis? Well, it's not. So therefore we have to look at how to do things more efficiently, how to use capital much more efficiently. It's not just about growing the balance sheet anymore. And of course for ANZ, that is very much something which we had recognised earlier in terms of our super-regional strategy, in that we're looking for exposure in the high-growth markets of our neighbours.
You're targeting, in fact, 25 to 30% profit contribution from Asia by 2017. That's about double the current level.
Yeah.
How is the strong Aussie dollar playing for you there?
Well, in terms of the overall earnings, I mean, it's had a 2% reduction overall at group level in terms of our overseas earnings. But, currencies go up and down, and, that's one of the things that you shouldn't really worry about. I mean, we should look at our overseas earnings and business in terms of actually now the US dollar.
But
some
would
stage...
you say the same thing is true in terms of acquisitions or increases in investment over in the region?
Well, of course, the strong Aussie dollar actually gives you more firepower.
Indeed.
You know, so in that respect, it's an advantage to us.
Can I ask you also, since we're talking about Asia, about China's recent announcement about its desire in the iron steel industry to vertically integrate, because that could have big ramifications for Australia. Do you see that as a very significant announcement?
Well, I see it as a significant announcement. I think it will have an impact in the longer term, because you've got to imagine that the timescale of this is going to be quite significant. And this is where...
Interesting they verbalised it.
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, I think that was probably a warning shot across